I swear I can already foresee the amount of energy I'm going to burn just trying not to burst into flames of fury during this video. To make a long story short, for context, I had the misfortune of stumbling upon what I will generously refer to as an article. And I had a lot of thoughts and feelings, but I realized that probably most of you out there haven't read it, or I certainly hope not. What this means is that I'm going to be reading the article to you in its entirety, because otherwise this video will just be the insane ramblings of a very angry fairy. Since it's not very long, I'm going to read you the entire thing and then move on to dismantling it bit by bit. And believe me, there is so much to dismantle. Oh, and just for some additional context, although I do consider myself to be non binary, I will be referring to myself within the collective of women during this video, using we and us and stuff. Because although I do now identify as non binary, I was born AFAB, obviously, and I've gone through my life being fairly femme, and so that's the perspective I'm coming at this from. And if you want to find out if I do in fact spontaneously combust, you'll just have to watch till the end of the video. Okay, I'm going to read you the article now. I honestly cannot believe how many times I've had to read this now because, I was trying to make an effective commentary about it. But gosh, and I think you're going to empathize with me when you hear it, but I'll try to make it quick and painless. And yes, I printed it out because it is easier, and besides, the fairy realm doesn't have the best cell phone reception. The title of the piece is I Regret Belittling Men. At 63, I've ended up alone. And the author, Kate Mulvey. A few years ago, I went to Italy with my then boyfriend, James. As we sat tucking into a plate of frutti di mare at a seaside restaurant, I struck up a conversation with the waiter in Italian. While I was enjoying myself, James sat glumly and fiddled awkwardly on his phone. Back in the hotel room, he asked why I had ignored him. By speaking in a language he didn't understand, he said, I had managed to make him feel small. I could see his point. I spent quite a while chatting away, oblivious to how he must be feeling. I then went on to joke that as an Italian speaker, I would order everything for us. After all, he didn't know what osso buco meant. I was showing off. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened to me. I've always taken the driving seat, been determined to get the last word, and was too busy with books to master the art of charm. I'm convinced that the reason I'm still booking a table for one at the age of 63 instead of having settled with a significant other is because, like so many women of my generation, feminism has ruined my love life. Instead of empowering us, those ideals of the second wave feminists made us believe marriage and domesticity were to be avoided like the plague and that men were competition rather than partners. I might have a successful career as a writer and broadcaster, but I have never had children or been married, and my longest relationship lasted 8 years. I regret this. I had always imagined I would end up married with 2 wonderful children and living in a house in the countryside. I have paid a hefty price for my so-called liberation. I was 17 and a pupil at Godolphin and Latimer, one of Britain's most academic institutions, when I was introduced to the women's liberation movement. It offered such hope and excitement, and we spent our lunch breaks soaking up the feminist mantras of Germaine Greer and Betty Friedan. Act like men, they cried as they burnt their bras and demonized housework in the family. By the time I was 25, clutching a degree in French and Italian, I was a bright, confident feminist, keen to flex her intellectual muscles and to never let a man get the last word. I read Nietzsche for fun, and my bedside table has always buckled beneath the weight of substantial, intellectually challenging books. At first, men loved my wit and intelligence. You're such a breath of fresh air. I love talking to you. You're the first woman I've met who stimulates me, they'd trill. That was until I had lectured them for the umpteenth time on the virtues of modernism. "You'll never win an argument against Kate," one man said as he watched me outsmart yet another potential lover. Subtext: don't bother. Men have called me intimidating, scary, and opinionated. I now see that not only was I trying to prove I was their intellectual equal or superior, I was treating every encounter with a man like he was my adversary. If a date bought me a bouquet of flowers, instead of smiling and putting them in a vase of water, I would bite their head off. "Can't you buy me some nice olive oil or balsamic vinegar?" I said with an eye roll to one hapless suitor as he stood wilting faster than the fragrant offering he held in his hand. He had bothered to think about making me happy, and I crushed him for it. I placed so much importance on finding a strong man who could match me that I forgot men are people with feelings. Indeed, I had forgot I had feelings and hid my softness. I now see that I longed to be loved, but I was too scared to be vulnerable. I was using my sharp mind to protect my all too soft heart against yet further rejection. Another thing I regret deeply is my tally of one night stands when I was younger. I distinctly remember thinking it would be uncool to say no to the men I met at parties or dated, but I struggled to enjoy it. There was always a disconnect. This was abundantly clear the morning after. As I lay there, waiting for a sign of affection, he would be singing the triumphant "Had Her" song in the shower. Quick cheerio, and he was gone. While I pretended to enjoy it, I felt uncomfortable about sex so early on. I felt empty and used. My generation of women were encouraged to have sex like a man. In other words, have casual sex. But it backfired. Fast forward to now, the idea that women are different from men and that casual sex can be harmful to us is finally gaining traction. In her latest book, A New Guide to Sex in the 21st Century, the Young Adult Adaptation, Louise Perry explores how the sexual revolution impacted women negatively and led to unwanted consequences. She argues that casual sex, dating apps, pornography, and the normalization of sexual kinks are putting women at risk. Although contraception has reduced the chances of a pregnancy, she points to the risk of contracting diseases or being a victim of violence in a culture where premarital sex is the norm. Whilst I will never be a giggly man pleaser and have no intention of playing second fiddle to a man, the confident signals I have been giving out all these years were at odds with what is going on inside. I have learned to step back and let things go, and have realized that things mustn't always veer towards the satisfaction of the self. I am struck by how easy and peaceful it feels to let my dates or boyfriends take the lead. It is not a case of dumbing down or morphing into a Stepford woman, but simply dialing down a bit of me and letting them shine. FYI, my diary is wide open. Go on, I dare you.
Okay, fine. I'm cool. I'm fine.
Okay, deep breaths, deep breaths. We're just going to have a little cool down. Happy thoughts. Lower the blood pressure. Resist the urge to turn into a feral, screaming banshee. Okay, so we can all acknowledge that was a lot. So I'm going to take things one at a time in the order that they appear. Because honestly, it's like I have so many things to say about this piece that it's hard not to just like want to jump into the multiverse so that I can scream all of my complaints at once. You know, it's bad when I'm literally already annoyed by the second sentence of this thing. Learning languages is really cool. I've always loved languages. I am fluent in one other language and learning two more apart from my native tongue. But if you are not a native speaker of a language, and specifically if you are speaking in English and then just start throwing in words from another language, you are the most cringe kind of person.
Wait, he needs an extraction from Buenos Aires.
Ugh, it's just us. You can say Buenos Aires.
Like, I think we probably all know that the term weeaboo is not a compliment. Nobody likes that guy. Anyway, without getting bogged down in that whole conversation about, language and appropriation and all of that stuff, uh, it's just, she used the phrase frutti di mare instead of just saying seafood. She had a seafood plate. Why do you gotta be such a stuck-up B word, Kate? Second of all, you don't need to be speaking in another language to know that ignoring a person, especially your partner, is really rude. Even if she had been speaking to that waiter in Italy in English, if she sat there chatting away without ever trying to include her boyfriend or, say, excuse me to the waiter, but I'm with my date or whatever, that still would have been unacceptable. She is completely missing the point of what I think his name was James. I've read this too many times, as you can see, was saying, which is she made him feel bad because she was rude. She is a rude person. It had nothing to do with the Italian. I mean, the Italian makes it worse, but the core problem is that she is rude. And that's not even to mention, what does this have to do with feminism at all? Like, I feel this is something we learn in kindergarten. Like, you don't exclude people. We all learn to include everybody in the playtime. How has she gotten to 63 and not realized this? So, yeah, I don't think that, women wanting the right to vote or wear pants or have credit cards or own property or any of those things are to blame for Kate Mulvey's bad personality.
We're clearly soldiers in petticoats and dauntless crusaders for women's votes.
And I mean, speaking of her bad personality, she says, "This wasn't the first time that this happened to me." Yeah, I bet it wasn't. A personality this bad, that shit doesn't happen overnight. This is a lifetime of being a bad person. It has nothing to do with being a feminist. She goes on to say how she was always in the driver's seat and she was too busy with books to master the art of charm, whatever that means. Like, I think that honestly reading these words might cause the actual loss of brain cells, so I do apologize to everybody listening and watching. But the deconstruction of material like this, at least in my opinion, is very important because we are already going backwards as a society in so many ways, and I don't need to explain them to you. I don't even really want to list them all because it's very depressing. But I mean, if you look at the United States, I mean, just not that long ago, there was a very important federal ruling about women's autonomy that was taken away, and it's only getting more and more likely that rights are being taken away. I guess I just feel like there are already way more than enough people and structures poisoning the minds of young women and girls to, work against their own best interests. So we don't need like other women jumping on that bandwagon. Also, being assertive and intelligent, or if you want to say being driven and introverted, or however you want to put those things, those are not bad qualities. Those are good qualities. They didn't affect your ability to get a man. You don't need to be quiet and submissive in order to have a man and children and a happy life. That is so ridiculous. What is this? The verse from that song from The Little Mermaid? Or what about a magazine ad from the 1950s? Like, I can't believe I even have to say this in the year 2025, but like, listen up, Kate. We already have enough male misogynists. We don't need female ones too. Okay, this next line makes me furious. She writes, like so many women of my generation, feminism has ruined my love life. Instead of empowering us, those ideals of the second wave feminists made us believe marriage and domesticity were to be avoided like the plague and that men were competition rather than partners. No, just no, no, you're wrong. That thing you wrote, it is factually incorrect. I'm sorry if you had parents who raised you to see your entire life as one big competition and that every person you came across was like an opponent to be battled. But I guarantee you, this was not a pervasive mentality then or now. So I just want to take this opportunity to pause here and remind everybody that people tend to romanticize the past, especially big historical events and especially political movements that ended up being positive for society. And these historical romanticizations are often used by people who are conservative or conservative leaning to try to invalidate new and actually subversive political or social movements. A recent example would be something like the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, remember all those conservatives who were saying, oh, like, why can't they be peaceful? And what would Martin Luther King Jr. say? Well, I don't know if any of those people remember or bothered to look into it, but at the time civil rights was happening, Martin Luther King Jr.'s approval ratings were extremely low. People were not on board. People only want to seem like they were on board at the time because now it's embarrassing if you weren't on board. But when it was happening, yeah, most of America didn't want that. And Martin Luther King Jr. was seen as radical. Not as radical as some of the other Black Panther movements. And I know Malcolm X kind of takes a lot of the heat for radical Black liberation, and that is a video for another time. But the point is that when people want to keep control, they try to point to things in the past that supposedly exemplify what they want. It sort of is coming from the same place, at least in my opinion, as when people refer to the nebulous good old days, whatever days those were. The thing is there was no good old days. Even nostalgia, it's one of those things where certain properties, certain media, people get attached, they're emotionally invested because they saw these things when they were a child. And often it's like you don't want to go back to that because like things were bad then and you probably had lots to complain about, but you didn't have anything like heavy to worry about. You weren't aware of the politics of your own city, country, let alone the world. You didn't have bills or a partner or anything to worry about. So I think that we need to really keep in perspective how historical, social, and political movements actually were and not let people weaponize them against us. You know, Nobody wants to admit that they had to be dragged kicking and screaming over to the right side of history. And I think as we've really come to learn, ego plays a huge factor in people's ability to rationalize their behavior or the behavior of those around them. But I digress. Getting back to Kate Mulvey, I would like to encourage her to ask around her friends, family, acquaintances if they are or were still single 63. Boomers love to complain about how the bra burning generation of women ruined everything about marriage. And don't worry, we're going to come back to the bra burning because that is a whole other thing that never actually happened and was actually just a conservative moral panic. But I'm going to get back to that in another section because first we need to finish talking about this part. After reading this article and before looking into it, I hypothesized that if you adjusted for some of the modern day factors between when Kate Mulvey was a young woman and now, that the marriage rate has probably stayed about the same. I think that, again, you need to adjust for some factors, and I'm going to get to them. But just this was my hypothesis, right? That she's just making stuff up out of her ass because she doesn't want to face the fact that she's just a bad person with a bad personality. So that was my hypothesis. And since I'm interested in doing more than just wringing out a bunch of old ladies' sour grapes all over the page, I decided to research it a little bit. This lady made me so mad that I looked marriage data. She made me mad enough that I looked at charts and put lines on top of other lines and oh, it's coming. I'm sure that future me will be editing in extremely professionally edited charts right here. So Kate has told us that she's 63, and by virtue of simple math, I was able to deduce her birth year, and by coincidence, her parents did doink at a point in time where the marriage rate was relatively low. And I'm sure that there are plenty of factors that went into that. I know that the early 1960s were, peace and love, and there was a lot of, with the women's liberation, just less focus on domesticity in general. That does not mean it was demonized. And also, if you happen to look at these charts right here, the marriage rates went nothing but up for the next 20 years. So Kate Mulvey is full of crap. Just because they were at an all-time low in marriages the year she happened to be born, again, like during her prime, like teen and 20s dating years, the marriage rates were just steadily rising. So yeah, actually, if you look closely, you can see that the marriage rates only really decreased when Kate would have been in her 40s. But I'm going to get back to her in a second. Let's just focus on these charts for a moment here. Now, by the numbers, the marriage rate has decreased since then. And I mean, I'm sure that there are plenty of women for whom the reason is that they don't like the idea of the tradition being rooted in ownership and all of that good, lovely stuff from the past. However, I would argue that out of all the women in the world who are not currently married or who do not want to get married right now, the amount who are disinterested in marriage because they don't like the idea of like pretty dresses and being married to a man legally and blah blah blah, all the stuff that Kate thinks. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the smallest percentage. Like, I'm pretty sure that there are a higher percentage of women who currently aren't married because they think that they have a chance of getting with a K-pop idol or something.
I'm the bad guy. The
I don't know. It just really makes me question if Kate like lived on this planet for her whole life, and if she did, how has she not figured out what's going on here? And in the interest of being educational, if Kate Mulvey or anybody else is confused, I have compiled an abridged list of reasons why women today may be getting married at a lower rate. That also have nothing to do with feminism. First off the bat, let's just say it. There are plenty of women who are more in love with fictional characters or celebrities and who would literally rather be imaginary married to a anime character than deal with a real man. How about the wedding industry is a perfect symbol of like the wasteful materialism of capitalism, and it just grows increasingly out of control as influencers flaunt lifestyles that are beyond most people's means. And how about it's just plain easier for women to have financial independence, and it's easier for them to have options to get away from a bad relationship. And related to that last point, there are lots of people who just don't want a partner, that they're happy to be alone in that respect, and they don't need a romantic person in their life to be fulfilled. That's perfectly valid. Or what about that fewer queer people are closeted and getting married out of guilt or shame to do with their families? Like, I would qualify that as a massive net positive. And of course, the internet. On the modern internet, it's easier than ever to connect with people and have satisfying relationships with anyone from around the world. And that doesn't necessarily necessitate getting married to them. Okay, I am going to stop the list there, and it is abridged because seriously, we are only into the second paragraph of this thing, and I have so much more to say. So, fairly early in this article, Kate talks about how she regrets her life, how she wanted children and the white picket fence, but women's lib ripped it away from her. They stole her dreams. And apparently, that her very successful career was a hefty price to pay for freedom. Are you fucking kidding me? If I'm reading that correctly, and I do think I am, this woman, who keeps touting her own intelligence, by the way, is basically saying that if she could go back in time, she would throw rocks at the suffragettes because having any degree of financial freedom or bodily autonomy or, anything that has to do with having, any type of power of your own is not worth the cost of having a boyfriend, guys.
Our daughters will adore us, and they'll sing in grateful chorus. Well done, Sister Suffragette.
Apparently, it's just not worth being single and lonely in your 60s, as if those aren't two completely mutually exclusive things. Like, I hate to be the bearer of bad news and everything, but you do not get to blame your sad, lonely life on social progress. There are so many women who built up industries, careers, got promotions. I mean, look at that Lean In lady. And, they also managed to have families, have children, find fulfillment in their lives. And again, none of those things are, tied together. They're all possible separate from each other, but it is also possible to have both, as if somehow having the ability to earn your own money and have your own bank accounts and, not be forced into staying with whatever man you happened to marry forever. It's just not worth the social progress, guys. This whole piece just reeks of disdain and resentment for the women who fought and suffered and even died to give her the ability to do things like, I don't know, get a double degree in French and Italian. Like, it honestly feels impossible that somebody could lack not only the self-awareness, but also the social and historical awareness to not realize that the only reason she was even able to go to university was because of the progenitor feminists that she's complaining about.
Political equality and equal rights with men. Take heart, for Mrs. Pankhurst has been clapped in irons again.
Does she still feel like trading all her rights and her degrees for a husband? Putting myself in her shoes, I sure wouldn't, because somehow I feel like having fewer rights and fewer college classes would not somehow magically translate into more kindness and charisma. And here's the ultimately really annoying thing, at least to me, is that even if Kate Mulvey had lived in a universe where she got to be this like 1950s housewife from one of those old black and white TV shows, she probably still would have complained about it. I can almost guarantee she would have been complaining about how she's too smart to be stuck at home all day cleaning and cooking, and how her husband is just holding her back and keeping her down. It's honestly taken me way too long to realize that some people just want to be miserable. And when they say misery loves company, it is really true. Like, these people, they're not just determined to be miserable on the inside. They want to be miserable outwardly also and make everyone else around them as miserable as they are. Cannot relate. As we move on to the next paragraph, I'm going to finally return to what I said I would, the whole bra burning thing. She really makes a point to say how she was so inspired as a teenager by the women who burned their bras and demonized housework. Yeah. Okay. So, so in the same way that conservative people will often romanticize history in order to make it seem like they were on the right side all along, they will also often exaggerate things or just plain invent things that happened in the past because it can't be verified, or can it, in order to make their point or to make a point about the other side. Earlier, when I talked about her whole bra burning thing, I used the term moral panic. And that's because that's what it was. Like its contemporaries, for example, Dungeons and Dragons, or its successors, for example, goth makeup. The demon bra burning feminist never existed, the same way that Dungeons and Dragons was not causing children to worship Satan, and the same way that goth makeup was not causing school shootings. It's just that people can't hold on to the past forever, and so when there's something new and popular and they can't wrap their head around it, they have to just take it somewhere dark because otherwise they would have to acknowledge that maybe they're on the wrong side. Again, because I am interested in actually educating people, I am going to prove to you with some research here that the bra burning feminist was never real. And because I feel like I forced you to endure listening to Kate Mulvey's work earlier, it would only be fair if I read to you something from an excellent award-winning author who is now teaching at UC Berkeley. The full piece is actually quite long. That does tend to happen when you have something of substance to say. I have just selected a few bits and pieces, and I will link the full thing in the description so that you can read it yourself if you'd like. The title is How the Myth of Feminist Bra Burning Spread by Bonnie J. Morris. Few images are as relentlessly recycled as the portrait of angry feminists burning their bras in protest of the 1968 Miss America pageant held in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Inaccurate media publicity around that protest convinced many Americans that feminists, hostile to beauty and fashion, must be opposed in principle to attracting men or to being attractive, period. This stereotype of feminists being deliberately unattractive and antisocial continues to haunt young women. Yeah, it does. Throughout the 1960s, protests flourished best when paired with street theater, which attracted cameras and gave causes good publicity. This is a pre internet version of what you would call using a platform or using like a hook to say something bigger about the world. The Atlantic City protest began when members of New York radical women decided to make a statement about women being rewarded for appearance alone. Over 200 women participated. Yes, women threw girdles and curlers into a freedom trash can. However, the historic wooden boardwalk where feminists had assembled represented a real fire hazard, and Atlantic City's anxious mayor and police requested that nothing be set aflame. Thus, no bras were burned. Inside the actual Miss America event, activists unfurled a giant women's liberation banner over the audience balcony. Protest organizer Robin Morgan's comment to a New York Times reporter: "We wouldn't do anything dangerous, just a symbolic bra burning," convinced TV viewers that bra burning was the preferred activity of women's liberationists. I don't normally do recaps because I trust you to listen to me, but just to recap, there were bits and pieces of underwear tossed in a trash can that was probably going to be set aflame at some point, but then the city realized that the floor, the ground that they were on, sorry, I'm mad, was made of wood. And they were like, hey, please don't set fires. And so those women were like, yeah, this was just a symbolic bra burning. We didn't need to actually destroy anything. And somehow Americans heard that and thought, okay, that is the number one hobby of all feminists everywhere, is taking off their bras and burning them. The media's relationship with feminism would remain fraught with these tensions. Mainstream broadcasts mocked feminist protests, leading women to produce and rely on their own newspapers and journals. Legal challenges led by minority women would also help to redefine beauty and personal hygiene as individual and multicultural expression, asking, could a Black woman sport an afro or dreadlocks and look professional at her place of work? Must female lawyers wear dresses or skirts to practice law? Could girls wear trousers to school? In an era where reform schools still punished young Black women for daring to maintain unstraightened natural hairstyles, beauty remained a contested issue. From the outset, women's demonstrations were both playful and creative in attempts to subvert the patriarchy. From America's Witch, Women's International Terrorist Conspiracy from Hell, whose members hexed Wall Street. That sounds kind of familiar, huh? About hexing somebody powerful that you don't like. To the 1968 Miss America protests, where girdles were thrown into a freedom trash can, to the Miss World contest in November 1970, where protesters stood outside adorned with sashes that had slogans attacking the man made world. And damn, I really want these frickin' sashes. They read Misfit refuses to conform, Mislaid demands free contraception, Misgoverned demands liberation. So, in my personal opinion, the whole burning bra is an easy symbol for misogynists and especially Christians, which informs a lot of our misogyny. It makes it easy for them to latch on to it because it represents a lot of things that they simply cannot stand. The autonomy of a woman's body, the expression of sexuality in a way not approved by men, or the destruction of women's modesty. I think you get the point. And also, can I just say that it really should say something that we are this far into the video and I am only currently on the third paragraph of a 7-paragraph article. So we better just keep slogging forward like Atreyu and Artax because, man, it is easy to just start drowning in the swamp of misogyny. So she goes on to say how men really adored her when they first met, and they just gush about how refreshing she is and how they're, so stimulated by her intelligence. Does this not seem like just like a big backhanded burn to any other woman in Kate Mulvey's metaphorical weight class? Like, oh, I am the only woman who ever stimulate the men that I have come across. Like all other women that those men came across, I'm better than them. Man, is this like the boomer version of a manic pixie dream girl? Like, she is the worst kind of pick me, the kind that thinks they need to be better than all other potential mates instead of just naturally different as we all are. She's not like the other girls, you guys, I swear. She reads books. Okay, so I think it's just really important that I say this now to all the straight lady identifying folks who are watching this video right now. First of all, thank you for watching, but importantly, other women are not your competition, okay? Life is hard enough. Being a woman is hard enough. If we imagine life as like a marathon, a race, and here's the starting line, women are already starting from behind. And then, women of color and trans women of color. Do you see where I'm going with this? Is like, we do not need to pile on to all the structures that already exist to keep women down, to keep the status quo. Okay? I'm not saying you have to be besties with every girl you meet. I'm not saying that there's some unwritten girl code. Okay, I don't believe in that. I believe that you should just be a nice and kind person and that you shouldn't view other women inherently as competition because that is only perpetuating this cycle of just terrible misogyny. And while I'm clarifying, let me just make one other thing really clear. Feminism is not mutually exclusive of things like makeup or clothing, shoes, whatever, accessories. And feminism is not mutually exclusive of having a crazy career or being a stay-at-home mom or housewife. Those things are not mutually exclusive. And not to sound like some kind of generic podcast or something, but if we've learned anything in the last few years, it's that social division is highly profitable. Remember, people only care about making money. It's really money and power. That's the only motivations. And so when you take a side and decide what feminism is or isn't, what kind of women are or aren't, you're letting them win. You're giving into the divide. Don't give in. But getting back to Kate Mulvey and her work, good news, guys, is that Kate does not just view women as her competition. She also views men that way. I mean, she writes in her article, not only was I trying to prove I was their intellectual equal or superior, I was treating every encounter with a man like he was my adversary. Do I really need to spell it out that going through life like it's one big sparring match and treating everyone you come across like an opponent is just a trait of an unpleasant person? Like, we all remember the kid from our elementary school who was the story topper, right?
Why is it so important to you that your freak out is bigger than mine?
I'm a story topper, Elliot. You know that about me.
Ugh, when I was a kid, I had a friend like that who drove me crazy.
When I was a kid, I also had a friend like that, except he snapped and started playing hide the peanut butter with my dog Whiskers. You, my friend, have just been story topped.
Nobody likes that kid. That was a bad trait. We didn't emulate that child. I just kind of feel like humans are not inherently impressed with somebody who's constantly trying to prove that they're better than everyone around them. Actually, you know what? Let's just talk about that kid for a second, okay? I promise it will connect back to this topic. So I would say that most people with like a normal amount of emotional intelligence would probably realize by, I don't know, let's be generous and say the end of high school, that somebody who behaves that way is probably struggling with some deeper internal issues. Like, even if as children we were annoyed by the story topper at the time, if we saw that kid now, we would probably just feel sorry for them. Like, oh, that kid is clearly insecure and clearly feels the need to make up all this stuff or exaggerate all this stuff just to make up for whatever it is. Maybe there's a parent or sibling at home who's constantly putting them down, or maybe it's something else. The point is that we would know that this is something about them born of their insecurities, and we'd probably feel bad. But as for Kate Mulvey, I mean, I would probably feel sorry for her if she was 13. Might even feel sorry for her if she was 23 and just a really slow learner. We're very fortunate that most kids who do the story topping thing and the obnoxious trying to impress everybody and be better than everybody thing, most kids grow out of that by, like, again, high school. It's not a good trait and people don't respond positively to it. So, how Kate Mulvey managed to make it to 63 without ever growing out of this extremely unlikable trait is actually a little bit beyond me. Like, how are you going to sit there and publish an article blaming feminism for your own inability to grow the fuck up? She writes this self-pitying, oh, I forgot men have feelings. I forgot I had feelings and I hid my softness and I wanted to be loved, but I was vulnerable and it was all just self-defense. It was a protection thing. And it's like, yeah, okay. lots of us do come up with those types of rejection protection methods because that's what our brains are wired to do. However, when those things are bad for us or bad for the people around us, it is our responsibility to figure out a way to move past them or find healthier coping mechanisms. You can't just rely on a shitty, broken, juvenile defense mechanism and then say that that's perfectly fine for your entire 60 years on this planet. Give me a break. And she better not be pretending to be a tsundere, okay? She will give this entire trope a bad name. The point is, no matter what kind of relationship you're trying to form with somebody, whether it's romantic or platonic or professional, nobody likes a know-it-all. Nobody finds that attractive or endearing, and being a know-it-all is just going to drive people away. And yes, I do kind of feel like I'm sounding like a broken record at this point, but I just really feel like it's important to hammer home how misogynistic this way of thinking is and how it can pollute the minds of young girls who have fresh minds, who haven't learned everything from different perspectives yet. And if we let them be infected by this kind of mindset that Kate Mulvey has, we are going to, again, just keep backsliding as a society. Is that really what these people want? I have to keep pointing it out. I have to keep explaining it. It is all I can do to ensure that other people do not take this seriously. This is bad. Because, see, I do know that kids are a lot smarter than we give them credit for, but, and I explained this in another one of my videos, but I'll try to be concise here, is like when you are raised by people, you will absorb all their thoughts because you have nothing else to compare it to. And that is sort of how your brain makes connections. And it's like, it could be something as ridiculous as like, oh no, we only drink milk on Tuesdays. Like, if you grew up in a house where that was the rule and that was all you did, then you would think that like that's how life works, is that everybody only drinks milk on Tuesdays. But unfortunately, those things are not usually nice and silly. They're often things like political opinions or social opinions, and they can worm their way into the minds of kids without them even realizing it, without us realizing it. And so I just think that we have to be sure that we are leading by the correct example here. Because, when you're a kid, you feel like all the adults, all the grown-ups have everything figured out. And then you do grow up and you realize that everybody is just fumbling around in the dark, trying their best. And so, again, we can try to like leave, I don't know, breadcrumbs along the way so that there's less tripping and falling for future generations. At least I would like to think that that's what our responsibility is. Now, let's see what's next. Oh, yay! Now we get to go into an age-old tradition, the shaping of sexuality. I suppose that no, anti-feminist boomer bitch rant would be complete without a condescending soliloquy about the shame and, you know, failure of sexual freedom. Okay, look, I know that I'm getting a little bit silly because if I don't, then I'm gonna get really angry. And I feel like I've already been pretty angry in this video. And I'm not an angry fairy. I'm not. I am generally a very soft-spoken, understanding, patient person. But I just can't stand by and let people around me destroy what little progress we've already made in a world that is going wrong. And so, yeah, I'm being a little silly. I hope you can bear with me. I'll try to tone it down. Anyway, back to the very fun topic of slut shaming. So, much like the story topper kid, I think I would feel more like sorry for somebody like Kate if these comments were just so steeped in misogyny and just made up actively harmful ways of thinking, you know, all this blaming of feminism. And as I'm pretty sure I have shown extensively in this video, none of the things that she is blaming on feminism had anything to do with feminism. It had everything to do with being a bad person, or at the very least, having an extremely bad personality. But for the sake of being fair, there is one thing I think I should address from a place of empathy. She says in the article, I distinctly remember thinking it would be uncool to say no to the men I met. And yeah, I can relate to that. In my time, I have definitely let more than one man talk me into bed after I'd already declined his advances or been manipulated into bed by somebody who I wasn't really looking to have that kind of relationship with. And I do think that there's a real conversation to be had there. We should be talking about how society conditions women to avoid rejecting men and not saying no. And yeah, it's downright dangerous sometimes, even. And that's another conversation. I mean, you only need to Google something like women killed after rejecting a guy at a bar to realize how frequently this actually happens. And yeah, that is really grim, but it's also really important that we think about what is actually worth discussing. And in this case, there is, again, the real conversation to be had. So why does Kate Mulvey want to talk instead about how casual sex is harmful to young women? Why isn't she providing any insightful commentary into the, way that children are raised so that boys and girls see sex very differently? Or, the alarming rate at which women are hurt or murdered for saying no to men who felt entitled to their bodies and time? Or how about any commentary at all on the concept of keeping boys at home where they can't be a fucking menace to society instead of forcing girls to be chaste and modest and avoid being a temptation or whatever? No, Kate Mulvey is having none of those conversations. She's not making any comments like that. Instead, the conversation Kate Mulvey wants to have is feminism bad. As we go through this, I just have to wonder more and more why nobody can stand being around this woman. Kate Mulvey claims that women of her generation were all urged to have sex like a man, and that the entire sexual revolution backfired.
No. Okay. So, where do I start with this?
The entire point of feminism is giving women the right to choose. It is the choice to live their lives without everything being governed by the whims of a man. And look, I am legitimately sorry if some random woman at some point in your life told you that feminism was about hating men. It isn't. That feminists can't be stay-at-home moms. They can. Who told you that you have to act exactly the same as a man? You don't. Or any other bullshit. Okay, I'm sorry if somehow somebody got the message that mixed up that they communicated it to you in that way. But I don't think that happened. And even if we suspended our disbelief to the highest degree and said, okay, that is the case, well, you can't blame an entire movement for one person making an argument in bad faith. And frankly, if I had to bet real money, I would bet that not one person, not a single living soul, ever told Kate Mulvey that she needed to doink every person she came across because that's what a man would do. Also, I'm probably going to laugh and smile a little bit here because I'm so incensed by this, but isn't it really telling just how deep and ingrained the misogyny of our society runs when Kate is talking about how the one night stands made her feel bad, how they made her feel empty and used, and how the men would sing a song about hooking up with her and then immediately leave. And instead of blaming the men, instead of blaming any man for being not affectionate or being flaky or being, a shrimp, I don't know. The point is that instead of blaming men, she decided to blame feminism. She decided to blame women for wanting to have any semblance of autonomy, whether sexual or otherwise, for the extremely lacking behaviors of men. And she's not the only one. And that makes me really fucking sad. And your generation has nothing to do with your discomfort about sex, okay? There are people of all ages who have varying levels of comfort about sexuality, about sexual activity, and that has nothing to do with age or the generation. And sure, we could point to some puritanical Christian norms that came along with colonialism and, imperialism and all of that stuff, but that is again a whole other video because if I got into that, then this would just never end. Much like the rest of her extremely pick-me statements, she makes another bunch of backhanded comments about other women, like saying how much she disavows being a giggly man pleaser. As if any woman who happens to be agreeable and have a good sense of humor and is capable of interacting with a man on like pleasant terms is apparently just shallow and vapid and doing it for the approval of a man. That is so insulting. It's beyond insulting. And by the end, she talks about things like, oh, I'm not dumbing myself down or becoming a Stepford woman. Okay, so spoilers for the ending of the Stepford Wives. If you care about that story, I'm gonna just spoil the whole ending right here, so skip ahead a little if you want. Um, yeah, in that story, which is kind of like a horror story, in my opinion, all the women turn out to be robots. What kind of commentary is Kate Mulvey making about other women who are nice to their husbands, who get along with their husbands? Oh no, we're all just idiot robots who like to bake and clean and do whatever a husband says. Like, what? This this is literally the most unkind way to look upon other women that I can think of. At the end of all of this, I really just have to wonder if Kate Mulvey has ever heard the expression, if it stinks like shit everywhere you go, you should check the bottom of your shoes. Even in that moment at the very end, where she seems to be so close to grasping onto a sliver of self awareness, she still doesn't seem to be able to grasp the actual truth. It's not everybody else. Feminism isn't a problem, Kate Mulvey. You're just a bitch. Thank you so much for coming on this horrific adventure through the swamp of misogyny with me. I really, really appreciate your time. As always, stay happy and stay healthy because you are precious.